Yeah.
I really, really enjoyed it. I think my brother and I, who worked together for this outlet, we were reflecting on it afterward, and honestly, this is one of the strongest films we've seen this year.
Well,
Um,
thank you.
from start to end, it just kind of grips you and doesn't let you go. So I guess first off, I just wanted to say congratulations on that, and then second, how do you feel about the film making its debut at Fantastic Fest? How is this a good fit?
It's been great. And by the way, you guys reviewed it, right?
Yep, yep.
Yeah, that was I think my favorite. I normally don't. I try not to read reviews because I've had mixed reviews on everything I've ever done, and so this time around, a few of my reps were like, "You got to start reading a few of these. They're really cool." And it's very kind the things you said about the movie. So thank you guys very much. It's been super cool that the choice to come to Fantastic Fest. I've I've never been present at this festival, but it's always been uh, as far as the movies that come out of this festival, it's always been like festival, like the one that I prefer the most. So many great films have had either their world premiere or U.S. premiere here. Movies like Titane and just movies that I love, and so I've always wanted to come. Never been able to make it, and Tim League, one of the founders of the festival, I met him about a year ago, and he watched the movie, and he invited us to come, and I knew it wasn't really going to be. And then he showed it to his programmers, of course, and they had to sign off on it. But it was one of those things where I didn't know whether we'd be allowed to come here because it's not my move. I mean, it's my. I mean, I guess in some ways it's my film, but this is my first experience with a studio, and so Miramax essentially bought my script and then hired me to direct it. So I'm working for them, and they own the movie. So I just it's up to them how they sell it. So I didn't know where they wanted to go with it. And I know there was talk about Sundance because I'd been there before. And but it was so far off that they didn't want to wait to see what the answer would be as far as getting in there. And it just came together that we were able to premiere here. And I'll tell you what, it's been just a magical experience. I mean, just the fact that it's all at the draft house and it's all so contained and it's not intimidating and you don't have to run all over town to see movies, but also just the crowd here. I mean, they just get everything that I would hope somebody to get in this movie, right? And so it's been all the in during the Q&As and during the screenings. It's been just so much fun for me to watch this movie with an audience, because I love to see if people are laughing when I'd like them to laugh, if people are scared when I'd like them to be scared, if they're surprised. And so this crowd, and I don't know if it's a curse or a blessing that we premiered here, because I mean, who knows if there probably won't ever be a crowd quite as perfectly curated for this movie, but it's great because during the Q&As, we've just had all the things in the movie that I was afraid might be misinterpreted by people who may have thought, who don't know me, who may think I'm coming from a different place thematically or in some sort of message. Nobody's misinterpreting those things. So it's been really cool. And it's been great specifically for me to see how women have been responding to the movie, which is fantastic because I'm not a woman and I directed this movie and the lead's a woman. So I just really was hoping that there would be a specific type of reaction, and it's been great. And I think a lot of this just has to do with Fantastic Fest and how fantastic it is and how cool and the people are who come here because they just love movies. And they're up. It seems like the crowd here is really just all about wanting something unique and different, and they really have open minds. And so I hope I get to come here with every movie. It's been
Yo,
amazing.
I hope so too. I mean, you said the word or the phrase perfectly curated, and I feel like that really hits the nail on the head here with the fit. Yeah, so I did want to talk a little bit about the film. There's so much nuance to it and in depth that it just really has you on the edge of your seat the whole time. I think a lot of that has to do with this nonlinear structure that you employ going from chapter three and then, kind of out of order. I thought that was really unique. We've seen nonlinear storytelling, time and time again, but you had a really unique spin on it. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you approach the narrative structure of your film.
Thanks. It's weird. I'm not able to, some people, part of the reason sometimes I'm not a great writer for hire, sometimes I am, but it has to, and I don't, I guess I'm probably officially still not supposed to talk about writing, and I won't. I'll kind of I'll get around that in this way. Basically, when I decide I want to tell a story in a certain way as a director, it's I'm not able to um, just decide, oh, I think I'm going to make a horror film. So let me make something that's a horror film. Let me come up with something that's a horror film, or I want to make a non-linear movie. Let me come up with that. I can't just force myself to come up with something. I have ideas that come to me, and I have movies that all of a sudden I want to make. And sometimes they're a certain way, sometimes they're another way. And once I'm compelled to make something, it's pretty easy for me to conceptualize it and put it together. And it might not end up being good. Other people might not like it, but for me, the process becomes easy once I know what I want to do. And so here it was weird. I never really thought about, I mean, it's funny, a lot of the movies that people are referencing when they're seeing this aren't the movies that really inspired me, I think, to make a nonlinear movie. 21 Grams is one of my favorite movies of all time. And I remember watching that and just being really blown away by how thrown off or mystified you are throughout the movie, but never confused. It's like every moment in it was compelling, and you don't know what's happening or always what time path you're on, but it's all going to make sense at some point. And so I remember loving that film. I loved Memento when I saw it, and even all the way back to like Goodfellas. I mean, there's elements of that there, and so I was pitching this movie, and then I started shooting the movie. And then, of course, the most obvious, nonlinear movie that hadn't even crossed my mind, I swear to God, was, Pulp Fiction. And so that, of course, I was like, oh no, what am I doing? Because my first feature was a Western, and it came out the same year Hateful Eight came out. And all the reverence in the world to Mr. Tarantino. He loves film, and he's a fantastic craftsman. He's just not specifically. I think both of us are influenced by a lot of the same people, but his movies aren't the movies that were necessarily the ones that made me want to make movies at first, although I love his movies. So I was like, how am I doing this again by accident? Like, this is and the coolest thing is that I think it's great because there's been a lot of people have referenced, like, this is really cool because it has a nonlinear element like Pulp Fiction did, which is a huge compliment, that it even there's similarities, but most people don't think it's like it, which is great. So it's like they've said it's its own thing, but it has those elements. And I was terrified as I was like, is this just going to be like me trying to go up against this movie that is one of the greatest movies ever made, and people, and I didn't want to do that either. So I think it's cool that so far here it feels like the nonlinear element, even though it's been done before in other movies, I feel like we do it in our own way, and people are noticing that. And I think with this movie, for me, there was some discussion about putting it in order. Not on my end, but you're always dealing with financiers and producers and all kinds of really cool creative people who've come together to help you make your movie, and you have to collaborate with them, because if you don't, like, you're an asshole. Like, I mean, they've given you millions of dollars to make your movie, and so I always want to make people happy who've supported me and give it, made my dreams come true. So I always want to listen. And there were a lot of great ideas, and there's a lot of notes that have been incorporated from people that are in this that I think made it stronger. But one of the ideas was maybe we should put it in order, and it was just one of the only things I couldn't get behind at all. And thankfully everybody saw where I was coming from after a while, and they were really reasonable about it. But when we put it in order at one point, and I knew it would prove our point. Because for me, the movie is it's sort of conventional and a little bit familiar and boring to me when it's in order. The whole idea here was to make this compelling by telling it out of order, and that's, the story structure is sort of the soul of the movie, aside from the actors, of course, and in the music and all that. But yeah, it had to be told out of sequence, and it wasn't written in sequence and shuffled around or anything. And the interesting thing is too, um, I knew like when it came to me, it was always in chapter 3 was first, and I didn't quite know what chapter was going to come next, and then it goes from chapter 3 to chapter 5, and it was like, okay, 3, 5, 1, and so it just, like, you think of something and it usually is 3 acts, 1, 2, 3 in a row. This came to me this way. It was a really bizarre experience, and I just knew that was how it had to be. So I'm glad it's working for people, because I was really afraid that, if it's something that makes sense to me isn't necessarily going to translate to you, right? So it seems like it's working really well for the people here, and it's been so nice to see that. Really,
No, I definitely think it's working
really
well. And
good.
you mentioned there about films like Memento, right? And those films where they keep you on your toes, but they're never convoluted and they don't lose you. And I love that about your film, how you're able to play with time as this narrative tool, but it never becomes it's always approachable, it's always digestible. So I really appreciated that. I wanted to talk a little bit about the cast too, if you don't mind. Willa Fitzgerald is fantastic in this movie. She is incredible, and without getting into spoilers, just where the film ends is so different from where it begins, and a lot of that has to do with her, the range in her performance. I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about her and why you wanted to cast her as the lead.
And I'll talk about Willa Fitzgerald anytime you want. She she is just a marvel. I mean, I can't imagine the movie without her on any level, and so grateful that we ended up with her, because it might not even be working without her in it. She's, that role is so important, to have this vulnerability and to have this strength, and to also be just somebody that people want to look at, like, that you can't take your eyes away from. And that's not something that can be taught. And it's one of those rare things that the biggest movie stars in the world have, and there's like 20 of them, and that's it, right? And so no matter how good looking somebody is, or how well they speak, or how good of an actor they are, you can't, that thing that makes you not be able to look away from them, that movie star. There's a reason people get paid a lot of money to star in the biggest movies in the world, because those people have that thing, and she has it. Somehow I got lucky enough to find somebody who is an seriously accomplished actor, well trained, cares so much about the craft, has done so much, but isn't the biggest movie star in the world yet, even though she's going to be. And so it was really just catching somebody at that point in their career, at this young age, was just so exciting, because you always want to work with somebody with that sort of charisma, and you have to hope that Kate Blanchett says yes to your movie. Like you get in these impossible positions, and so sometimes you get lucky enough to get them early. And so she was. It's interesting. My editor, who I trust with my creative life, Chris Bell, he lives down the street from me in LA, and a few houses down, and he was editing another movie while I was casting this movie. And I was kind of, we're looking through the usual suspects, like movie stars who the studio liked and I liked, but probably we weren't going to be able to afford at this budget. Kinds of weird, oh, maybe we'll cast this person, maybe we'll cast, and we were just having those conversations. And then we sort of came to a place with the studio, which was really cool. I remember Bill Block calling me and just saying, you know what, like, we need a movie star, but let's get the best actor. Like, don't worry about sales value and Poland or the like any of the foreign market stuff or this market. Like, let's not worry about what their domestic number is. Like let's just get the best actor and make sure it's somebody who works a lot and who people like. And so I started that that really opened it up for me because I was able to call agents that I know. Who do you have that you think would be great for this? Do you have a breakout person that you think isn't discovered yet in this way? Somebody great on TV, somebody who's done a couple films that won Sundance, but aren't, like not everybody's heard of, whatever. And so I called this agent named Christy Hall at Paradigm, who's one of my favorite people. And she said, Willa Fitzgerald is the one for this movie. And I'd never heard of her, which is shocking because all of a sudden I started talking to my mother-in-law and father-in-law and my parents and people, other producers, and everybody was like, oh yeah, she's amazing. She was in The Goldfinch. She was in Reacher. I mean, Reacher was really popular at the time. It was like the #1 streaming show on Amazon. And so this is just not like I'm watching, Shudder in the Criterion Channel. And I'm not in that world of television as often as everybody else around. And so I was like, wow, she's really that good. So I started watching everything. I watched the whole season of Reacher. I went down this rabbit hole and I was like, she's really good. I watched The Goldfinch and she sort of disappears into these different roles. And so I knew she was really good, but I'd never seen her do anything like this. And so I met with her and we had this really great meeting. And I liked her, but I was like still kind of like I still haven't seen her do this. And my editor called me and said, I'm cutting this movie that hasn't come out yet. You got to come over to my house. And I ran over to his house and I watched her in a scene from this film. Finally had all the pieces of the puzzle. I saw she had played 5 different roles that I'd watched, and all of a sudden I understood exactly how she could do this. And so I think we had another meeting, and I just loved that she never talked about the evil in any of these characters. She or the negatives, or the flaws. She talked about what she related to in her character, and she talked about how much love she felt for this character, and even in her flawed moments. And so that was so important to me because I want this character to have so much humanity, and I want the audience to love this lady, right? And so she brought it, and it was really cool because I got her approved quite quickly from the studio. Roy Lee, our producer, was a big fan of hers, and he called Bill Block and they talked about her, and everybody got really excited about her, and then we cast her. And the interesting thing is there was our wish list was like age 20 to 60. I mean, we had some really great actresses who were 55 on the list, and it was just in age and everything else. It was just a very diverse list. Everybody was so different, but they all had that quality that we're talking about, And so we knew we were going to pick the lady. She ended up being younger than I initially imagined, for sure. And then we cast the villain opposite her based on that. And Kyle came from the same agent. And she said, "This is I've already not done you wrong. I have your other guy. I have your villain." And so I watched Dinner in America, which somehow I'd missed at Sundance, and it was amazing, and he was amazing. And I started watching his stuff, and that was definitely a no-brainer. And then I remember talking to Sean Baker, who's an idol of mine and a little bit of a friend, and he told me that he was in love with Kyle and wanted to work with him. And I was like, if he's good enough for Sean Baker, he's good enough for me. So the rest is history, and they just got along so well, and it's really intense what they have to do. I mean, he's trying to kill this woman for so much of the movie, and they just had such a great relationship as people on the set too. So amazing actors, both of them. Can't wait to work with them again.
Yeah, you built, obviously a great foundation with the script and everything, but so much of it ends up being in the actor's hands, and I think there's that you talk about, that intangible kind of quality of a movie star, and Willa definitely has that. No, I wanted to thank you again for speaking with me today. Best of luck with the film. I really think it's going to reach its audience. I loved it. So yeah, best of luck with everything.